Where I'm sitting right now in my house is about a mile or so away from some train tracks, so from time to time I get to hear a nice little train rumble in the background. It's not a problem or anything, it doesn't happen that often, and when it does it's just some mild background noise, but I always wonder about the people who live right next to these train tracks. Like, it must be a lot worse for them. But even that is nothing compared to what some people had to experience in Japan in 1989. Japan is a world leader in high-speed trains, especially maglev trains that cut down on friction and travel at hundreds of miles an hour. So fast, in fact, that they were causing a kind of sonic boom. Okay, so it's not like a real sonic boom because they weren't breaking the speed of sound or anything, but as they were going through tunnels, they were going so fast that they were compressing the air in front of them so that when they exited the tunnels, it did kind of make an explosive noise. So yeah, imagine living in an apartment right next to the opening of a tunnel and hearing what basically sounds like a cannon going off several times a day. So people complained about it, obviously, and the trains were forced to slow down, which kind of defeats the purpose of having a high-speed train. Engineers set forth working on the problem, most of which required redesigning the tunnels in some way, which had been a huge construction project. But one engineer named Eiji Nakatsu had a different idea. Turned out he was also an avid bird watcher, and one of his favorite birds was the kingfisher. Kingfishers eat fish, hence the name. And they do it by flying over water, finding a school of fish, zeroing in on the one they want, and then dive bombing into the water at full speed. It's actually kind of insane. And these birds are designed to do this and create as little splash as possible to make this hunting more effective. And Nakatsu recognized that these birds were kind of doing the same thing that these high-speed trains were doing. They were moving from one medium to another. Birds obviously are going from air to water, but these trains were going from low pressure to high pressure, so similar idea. So he used the shape of the kingfisher's beak as a model and used that to redesign the front of the train. And it worked. Not only did it cut down on noise, but it made it 15% more efficient and 10% faster. This is an amazing example of lateral thinking, but it's also a great example of a design philosophy known as biomimicry. If you think technology is advancing at a rapid pace, you're right. In fact, it's kind of been advancing at a rapid pace for a few hundred years now. I mean, just looking at what humans have created since the Age of Enlightenment is mind-boggling. Some of the engineering and technological feats include the telescope, the submarine, interchangeable parts, coffee pots, plows, sewing machines, power tools, skyscrapers, televisions, and the artificial heart. We could spend all day listing all the inventions that have been created since the 1600s. In fact, I would bet pretty much everything around you as you're watching this would fit into that category. Once again, I've been making the argument for a while now that, people talk about the singularity as this moment, this thing that's going to happen in the near future. My argument is we're living in the singularity. It's been going on for a couple hundred years now. This especially makes sense when you consider that Homo sapiens has been on Earth for about 300,000 years. All this has happened very suddenly. All the innovations we've created, from fire to file sharing, is just a blink of the eye to nature. Nature has been testing and designing and reinventing itself for literally billions of years. Earth has been around for about 4.5 billion years. Life first appeared on our planet about 3.5 to 4 billion years ago. Multicellular organisms began to appear about 610 million years ago, and plants and fungi showed up around 500 million years ago. After that came arthropods, amphibians, mammals, and birds. Then us, of course. We're just little babies in the history of life on Earth. During all these billions of years, nature has been doing its own research and development, constantly coming up with new solutions and ways to survive and thrive. There's just no way that we can compete with this level of knowledge, this deep trial and error that nature's been going through all this time. Whether you believe in a creator that intelligently designed the universe or think it's just a process and time is the creator, we have a lot we can learn from it. And this is the basis for biomimicry. It's a way for us to find solutions by looking at nature. Or, quote, the practice of applying lessons from nature to the invention of healthier, more sustainable technologies for people, as defined by the Biomimicry Institute. According to biologist and the Institute's co-founder Janine Benyus, quote, learning about the natural world is one thing. Learning from the natural world, that's the switch. So when it comes to designing solutions for the challenges that we face, it makes sense to look at the greatest teacher we have available, nature. And there are several examples of nature-influenced solutions. Here's a few of my favorites. First up is Velcro. Let's let her rip and start with one that's kinda sticky. I'm talking, of course, about Velcro, which Swiss engineer Georges de Mestral invented and patented in 1955. As the story goes, about 10 years before that, he was out hunting with his dog out in the Alps, and he noticed some burrs got caught in his dog's fur. Being the curious type, he took the birds home and looked at them under a microscope, and he saw that they all had these tiny little hooks on them that made them grab on to fur and clothing and whatnot. So eventually he figured out a way to mass produce tiny little hooks like that and found a company that produced a sort of a carpet fiber thing that he could attach it to, and Velcro was born. Velcro, by the way, is a portmanteau of velvet and crochet, which means hook in French. But Velcro wasn't an immediate success. People didn't automatically gravitate toward this thing. Not until NASA came along and needed a way to keep objects stuck to the wall so that they wouldn't be floating around in space and whatnot. And then it kind of became cool because NASA. So cool that French fashion designer Pierre Cardin became obsessed with it and put it in a lot of his fashion designs. And of course, they're quite popular with sneakerheads as well. Oh, he got the Velcros. So let's talk about sharks for a minute. So sharks, they instill fear in swimmers and surfers on beaches and whatnot. They cause some people to need a bigger boat, but they have also inspired technology that helps reduce the spread of bacteria. Dr. Anthony Brennan is a materials science and engineering professor at the University of Florida. In 2002, he visited the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor to help the military find new anti-fouling strategies for its ships and submarines. He noticed one submarine returning to port covered in algae and said it looked like a lumbering whale. But then he asked himself, what's an example of a slow-moving ocean animal that doesn't attract algae? And sharks came to mind. So he took an impression of shark skin, specifically the dermal denticles, and discovered that they're arranged in a diamond pattern with tiny riblets. These riblets are rough and help keep microorganisms from attaching themselves to the shark's skin. Like most organisms, bacteria always look for the path of least resistance when they're trying to set up a little colony. Whatever's going to cost more energy, they're not going to do. And the little riblets on these shark scales provided just enough energy resistance to prevent them from forming on there. So a company called Sharklet Technologies has started creating products based on this natural innovation. The company's research has shown that its antibacterial film inhibits the growth of S. aureus, P. aeruginosa, E. coli, and other microbial species that may cause illness or even death. Sharks. Saving lives since 2002. But maybe the newest example of biomimicry is something called Microflyers. A paper published in the journal Nature just a couple of months ago in September proposed the idea of tiny flying microchips about the size of a grain of sand. It was proposed by some engineers at Northwestern University, and the idea is that the wind could carry these microchips around and they could be used to monitor things like pollution and airborne diseases. And they base these microflyers off of the maple tree's propeller seeds. These propellers cause the seeds to spin like a helicopter through the air before landing, and these microflyers do the same thing. According to John A. Rogers, who led the device's development, quote, "Our goal was to add winged flight to small-scale electronic systems. We were able to do that using ideas inspired by a biological world. We borrowed those design concepts, adapted them, and applied them to electronic circuit platforms." So there's two parts of the microflyers, the little millimeter-sized electronic components and the wings. And as it falls, the wings interact with the air to create a slow and stable rotational motion. And the weight of the electronic is low and centered to keep it from losing stability and just kind of like gently fly to the ground. They fabricated precursors to flying structures in flat planar geometries before bonding them over a stretched rubber substrate. When the substrate relaxes, a controlled buckling action happens and the wings pop up into precise 3D forms. And if you're worried that all these microflyers might create a lot of electronic litter, don't be worried. They're actually made out of biodegradable parts, so they'll just dissolve in water. Speaking of wind, let's talk about humpback whales. Wait, what? Humpbacks have tiny bumps on their fins called tubercles, and these tubercles are thought to help them fly more efficiently through the water. To test this, a Westchester University biologist named Dr. Frank Fish put a 4-meter-long flipper from a dead beached whale in a wind tunnel. His name is Frank Fish, and he's testing on whales. We're in the Matrix. Anyway, Frank Fish found that the flipper was fairly aerodynamic. These bumps on the flippers help the whales catch bigger and faster prey by channeling the water over the flipper to prevent loss of forward movement. And this helps the whales turn and move more quickly underwater. Interesting finding, but what can we do with that? Well, Frank Fish and his team realized that you can apply this to wind turbines and make them quieter and more efficient by increasing lift and reducing wind vortices. So they tried it, and it turns out that wind farms can get 20% more power and 25% more airflow using this. According to MIT, the blades help generate, quote, the same amount of power at 10 miles per hour that conventional turbines generate at 17 miles per hour. But it's not just engineering and structural problems that can be benefited by biomimicry. We can also apply it to social structures as well. For example, we can better understand traffic by looking at ants. A study published in eLife in 2019 showed that ants adjust their behavior based on their circumstances when moving along a path. The researchers wrote, quote, they speed up at intermediate densities, avoid collisions at large densities, and avoid entering overcrowded trails, unquote. Mimicking these strategies might help optimize self-driving cars to prevent traffic jams. And there's also a lot we can learn from bees about social learning. When a worker honeybee finds a new food source, they return to the hive and perform a waggle dance. This dance communicates where the food source is and works to influence other bees' behavior so that they'll try to find this new food source. Another larger group of bees will explore the new source, and then they'll return to the hive and they'll all do the dance too. This cycle happens a few times and reaches a tipping point where the whole bee colony makes a decision and moves together toward the food source. This strategy suggests that social consensus accelerates and influences learning. According to MIT professor Alex Pentland, adopting habits is a very conservative process that seems to be driven very largely by social learning, by seeing other people doing the same thing. Because bees in the hive are open to finding this new food source, they're able to continue growing the colony. So this waggle dance is not entertainment, it's survival. Bees, ants, and even fungi can teach us about elections and democracy as well. Our governmental system here in the US is based mostly on hierarchy and maintaining the status quo. It doesn't allow for much flexibility, which leads to the dreaded red tape. But for organisms like fungi, flexible intelligence has allowed them to adapt and survive over billions of years. But fungi decisions are made with a bottom-up approach. They're constantly feeding themselves a diverse array of information and reacting to real-time conditions. According to evolutionary biologist Dr. Tamsin Woolley-Barker, collective intelligence and distributed leadership are evolutionarily proven strategies for success. Diversity and independence, networked by transparent and truthful transactions, allow the wisdom of the crowd to go to work. With flat networks, we can innovate better, make more accurate decisions, and enjoy far greater resilience. But maybe the biggest lesson that we can learn from nature is that nothing is ever wasted. Nature is the definition of sustainable, and our current way of living is the definition of unsustainable. Maybe by taking some cues from nature, we can design a society that will last indefinitely into the future. One of the goals of biomimicry advocates is for designers to first ask themselves, how would nature solve this problem when trying to find a solution? And I think that's a smart approach. Nature has been around far longer than we have, and we have a lot to learn from it if we want to continue into the future with it. But speaking of great design, let's talk glasses. Many of you know that about this time last year, I got LASIK, meaning I didn't need contacts anymore or the trusted glasses that I'd had for about 10 years, which have now become just a part of my background. But as it turns out, once I got my distance vision fixed, I realized just how bad my close-up vision has gotten, because I have the old. So now it's time for reading glasses, and I actually went and got 2 pair from today's sponsor, Warby Parker. Yes, long before I became a soulless shill, I was a customer. And I went with Warby because I did like their designs, but also because they let you try them on at home. All you have to do is go on their site, find up to 5 designs you'd like to try, and they send you a try-on home kit. And I wound up going with these 2. And I wear them now whenever I'm reading or whenever I'm on my computer, which is most of the time, which means that I am actually wearing glasses far more now than I ever did before I got LASIK. Go figure. And now I need some new sunglasses, so I got another try-at-home kit. Warby Parker's glasses start at $95, including prescription lenses, prescription sunglasses, and now they have contacts as well. They ship the glasses to you, you can try them for 5 days, and when you're done, you send them back. There's no obligation to buy, and they cover all the shipping. Depending on where you live, there are also Warby Parker stores where you can get eye exams and other vision care by licensed opticians. And if you're extra lazy, you can go to the Warby Parker app and do a virtual try-on right on your phone. And with every purchase, Warby Parker donates a pair of glasses to someone in need. So it's good for you, it's good for them, and you can apply any FSA or HSA dollars that you have toward them, so it might be easier than you think. So if you're in need of new glasses, contacts, sunglasses, whatever it might be, anything that needs to go over your eyes, just go to warbyparker.com/Joe Scott and get 5 pairs that you can try on for free at home. You might say they're easy on the eyes. Thanks to Warby Parker for supporting this video, and a huge shout out to all the Answer Files on Patreon who have been supporting this channel for a long time and forming an awesome community, just being really great people. I've got some new names to shout out real quick. We got Anonymous Freak, Paul Pilcher, Funk Doctor, all right, Michael Ruprecht, Thomas Watts, Lou, Lynn Kenworthy, Solvi Barger, Sigurdsson, Benjamin Ross, Emily Rose, Sean Banks, and Amy Ruth. Thank you guys so much. If you would like to join them, get early access to videos, be part of an awesome community, get access to Discord, and all this cool stuff, you can go to patreon.com/answerswithjoe. Please do like and share this video if you liked it, and if this is your first time here, maybe click on this one, because Google thinks you might like that one, or any of the others down here that have my face on them. And if you enjoy them, I invite you to subscribe. I come back with videos every Monday. All right, that's it for now. You guys go out there, have an eye-opening rest of the week, stay safe, and I'll see you next Monday. Love you guys. Take care.